Hi, this is Professor Favors with American Literature. So the lecture is on today Charles Waddell Chesnutt's The Passing of Grandison. It's still part of realism, but we are also going to look at the concept of passing. So this is American Literature, Charles Waddell Chesnutt's The Passing of Grandison, part of realism, understanding passing. This lecture is subject to fair use. All right, so here's an introduction of Charles Waddell Chesnutt, born 1858, died 1932. Charles Waddell Chesnutt was born in 1858 in Cleveland, Ohio, to parents who were free African Americans. The family moved to Fayetteville, North Carolina, when Chesnutt was a young boy, and there Chesnutt attended school, eventually becoming a teacher and later a principal. Chesnutt's parents were mixed race, and Chesnutt himself could have identified as white, but chose to identify as African American. After he married, he and his wife returned to Cleveland, where Chesnutt passed the bar exam in 1887 and opened a court reporting firm, providing a prosperous life for his wife and four children. In Cleveland, Chesnutt began submitting his stories for publication and soon enjoyed success publishing a number of his stories in prominent literary magazines, gaining the attention of William Dean Howells, Mark Twain, and other writers in the realist literary movement. While Chesnutt was never able to support himself and his family with earnings from his writing, he continued to write and publish through the turn of the century. Later in his life, he devoted time and energy to political activism, serving on the General Committee for the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, NAACP, a civil rights organization formed in 1909. Chesnutt was one of the first successful African American writers producing fiction during the period of American literary realism. Chesnutt capitalized on the popularity of local color fiction after the Civil War and crafted stories about the Old South, depicting, for example, slaves living on plantations, interacting with white plantation owners. Chesnutt cleverly borrows the plantation tradition popular in local color fiction as a form which he then subverts by depicting African American characters with innate humanity, intelligence, shrewdness, and an ability to outwit those in power. All right, so here's an overview of the passing of Grandison. So Chesnutt works with similar themes, exploring in the passing of Grandison, for example, issues of passing or the process by which light-skinned African Americans could pass as whites. In this story, Chesnutt uses the term in a broader context by presenting a supposedly humble, untutored slave named Grandison, whose apparent dedication to the plantation's master, Colonel Owens, is quite possibly an act of passing. In other words, Grandison wears the mask of submission as a slave in order to trick Colonel Owens into believing that Grandison is no threat to the hierarchical order of the plantation, so that eventually his planning to escape with his family goes unnoticed. As the end of the story indicates, Grandison is in fact a much more dimensional, complex, determined, and daring person than the colonel can see or even imagine. So we need to look at the historical implications. I'm changing the begin and end date to make room for 1816. So American Colonization Society proposed to free slaves and send them back to Africa to stop slavery, which I believe is considered the pre-abolitionist movement. We still have some of the same dates, years. So the Panic of 1819, which is your financial crisis, Thomas Jefferson founding the University of Virginia. We have a few territories becoming states, Florida becoming a U.S. territory. We have a new one. The Missouri Compromise of 1820 allowed the state to become a slave state. So then we have 1826, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams dying on the same day, Andrew Jackson becoming president. There's this anti slavery sentiment that begins in 1830, which we can consider now as the abolitionist movement. Nat Turner's revolt, slave debates at Lane Theological Seminary. Then we have Oberlin enrolling students for female students for the first time. Um, more territories becoming states, Mexican American War. We have a new one, 1850, Fugitive Slave Act. In 1793, Congress enacted the first Fugitive Slave Act. Slave Acts for refugee slaves date back to 1643. So then we have Dred Scott, where slaves and blacks descended from slaves were not American citizens and could not sue. Of course, the American Civil War, Emancipation Proclamation, Reconstruction era, assassination of Lincoln. Then we have the amendments, 13th Amendment, 14th Amendment, 15th Amendment. The industrial revolutions as well, which led to economic growth and technological improvements. Don't forget the Spanish American War, 1898, which ended Spain's colonial empire in the Western Hemisphere. And then again, the 19th Amendment, women's right to vote. So, our new, just to make sure that you understand the new historical implications, that's your Missouri Compromise, okay? Then your American Colonization Society, then we have the Fugitive Slave Acts. Congress enacted the first Fugitive Slave Acts, everything from 1643. Everything is about the same from the previous lectures, but do keep in mind that these are sort of like your new, um, okay? These are your new ones so that you know the context, the full context of um, the discussion. Okay. All right, historical context for the passing of Grandison Fugitive Slave Acts of 1793 and 1850. So, statutes regarding refugee slaves existed in 1643, which further led to several states passing an additional law in 1705 to prevent runaway slaves from fleeing to Canada. The Fugitive Slave Acts were laws enacted for the purposes of capturing and returning enslaved people. So when you are reading the literary work, The Passing of Grandison, you're going to see references to certain laws or certain thinking. By the time of the Constitutional Convention of 1787, 5 states had abolished slavery. And then Congress enacted the Fugitive Slave Act of 1793 to authorize local governments in their pursuit of seizing and returning escaped slaves to their owners. The legislation included penalties for anyone who aided escaped slaves. Resistance to the 1793 law prompted the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850, which levied harsher punishments for anyone interfering in the capture of escaped slaves. To prevent free states from becoming safe havens for runaway slaves, the Fugitive Slave Clause, Article 4, Section 2, Clause 3, to the U.S. Constitution read that no person held to service or labor would be released from that if the person escaped to a free state. So keep this ideal in mind because this is your context for the passing of Grandison. Further context, so historical context again, the abolitionist movement is dated 1830 to 1870. So the anti-slavery movement, deemed as the abolitionist movement, dates between 1830 and 1870. Before the movement began in 1816, the American Colonization Society proposed to free slaves and send them back to Africa. Because the Missouri Compromise of 1820 provoked anti-slavery sentiment, the state was allowed to become a slave state. The campaign to end slavery transitioned into the abolitionist movement. It emerged as a full enterprise beginning in 1830. The goal was to end the practice of slavery by mimicking the tactics of the British abolitionists who were typically white and who saw slavery as an abomination, argued for the ending of slavery and the emancipation of enslaved people. To ensure they achieved this goal, they ran for political office and spread anti-slavery literature. However, the divisiveness around the issue of slavery contributed to the American Civil War, 1861-1865, which further ended slavery. Famous abolitionists are William Lloyd Garrison, Harriet Beecher Stowe, Frederick Douglass, John Brown, Susan B. Anthony, and Harriet Tubman. This is further um, what you will encounter in a reading. So we need to be a little bit reminded of realism, especially when it comes to local color, since um, Chestnut is using local color strategies to paint a picture of the anti-slavery sentiment, abolitionist movement, as well as the fugitive slave laws. So, recap realism 1870 to 1910. Realism is defined as the representation and depiction of objects, actions, social conditions as they are versus idealization. There is an emphasis on the everyday familiar experiences. Realism is influenced by American Civil War. Writers tend to depict the way the world is and was at a particular time in history, emphasizing the experiences of middle class and working class regions. And then they also focus on the human cost of the American Civil War. And then remember just your differences again. Romantic writing focuses on the fantastical, adventurous, heroic versus actual. Realism writing focuses on the real, accurate imitation of life, which is considered truth in fiction. So you will have a real location, but the literary work will consider it would consider that location from the perspective of fiction writing. And then realism writing tends to focus on the everyday, ordinary citizen, what is actually going on. So let's look at a recap of local color, 1865 to 1888. So remember, local color is a method realists use to help readers see the setting, which may be a particular locality. Local color writers reveal habits, customs, religious influences, dress, fashion, favorite foods, language, dialect, common experiences through the character and the people of the surrounding area. Local color writers explore the narrative from the perspective of the outsider, who is often a traveler visiting a rural, isolated locale. The outsider is considered a worldly stranger who believes he is superior to the country bumpkins. However, he is often tricked or fooled by the local inhabitants. Okay, so then local color writing is represented by characters referring to the area or the time as the good old days and the way things were. Stories of the Old South are filled with nostalgia of a bygone era. For example, the plantation myth is presented as an altered view, idyllic for both the master and the slave. And then local color writers such as Charles Chesnutt deconstructs the plantation myth by depicting the power and intellect of slaves against their racist landowners. So let's look at the concept of passing. This is an overview, and we're also going to look at the etymology of the term. So passing is a theoretical term typically applied in English and literary criticism. It is defined as someone presenting as a member of a social and or racial group that is inherently different from their actual identity. For example, a black person who has a lighter complexion may attempt to pass as white for racial and social reasons. The same is true of any racial and or ethnic group where the person's pigmentation is closer in hue to the dominating society. The individual who passes is usually motivated by a desire and pursuit of social acceptance with the expectation that will lead to avoiding racial discrimination. That is your typical definition, but when it comes to racial passing, there is that's the definition that we often use. So etymology of passing, the word passing has its roots in Middle English. It derives from the French word passer, which means to pass through. For racial and social reasons, passing is a signifier for a person who presents oneself as a member of a different racial or social group. There are different concepts for passing: physical movement, social identity, intersectionality, cultural commentary, literary and cinematic themes, and self perception and identity. Just recently, we had a film that came out titled Passing, based upon Nella Larson's work. And the director made her directorial debut, Rebecca Hall. Passing as a theoretical term is rooted in issues dealing with identity and societal expectations. So here are some literary works and theories that explore passing, and you can always research this on your own. The Nella Larson's Passing 1925 is available online. It focuses on the racial and psychological complexities of passing for African American women. Then W.E.B. Du Bois's The Souls of Black Folk focuses on the concept of double consciousness for Negroes navigating the color line, feeling a sense of two-ness in a world that doesn't afford the black man authenticity of the American experience. And then John Howard Griffin's Black Like Me focuses on a white man who darkens his skin to experience racial discrimination in the Deep South. And he was a journalist. Literary theories that explore passing include post-colonial theory, critical race theory, psychoanalytic theory, gender and queer studies, cultural studies. And of course, this list is not exhaustive. So that was sort of like the overview of the topic, the introduction to the topic. So now we're going to discuss the passing of Grandison, and we're looking at passing in a broader context in terms of passing as a submitted uh, slave or submitted person to a master. So remember, you need to have your reading out when you are, or at least have it already read, so that when I copy and paste select passages, you'll know where I am. So Dick's decision and basis. Remember, this is about the passing of Grandison, who is a slave, but he also has a master, Colonel, and the Colonel has a son named Dick. Dick Owens. All right, so when it is said that it was done to please a woman, there ought perhaps to be enough said to explain anything. For what a man will not do to please a woman is yet to be discovered. Nevertheless, it might be well to state a few preliminary facts to make it clear why young Dick Owens tried to run one of his father's Negro men off to Canada. Keep that in mind, because remember, anyone who aids in in the escape of a slave uh, would receive the penalty of the law. And here is an example of someone who did that. So in the early 50s, when the growth of anti-slavery sentiment and the constant drain of fugitive slaves into the North had so alarmed the slaveholders of the border states as to lead to the passage of the Fugitive Slave Law, a young white man from Ohio, moved by compassion for the sufferings of a certain bondman who happened to have a hard master, essayed to help the slave to freedom. The attempt was discovered and frustrated. The abductor was tried and convicted for slave stealing and sentenced to a term of imprisonment in the penitentiary. So this is information that Dick would actually have before he makes uh, his decision to run off one of his father's Negro men off to Canada. Now let's look at Dick's character as perceived, as socially perceived. His father doesn't talk about him like this, but the woman that he's courting and the judge that he worked for actually perceives him in this way. So Dick Owens had attended the trial. He was a youth of about 22, intelligent, handsome, and amiable, but extremely indolent, in a graceful and gentle, manly way, or as old Judge Fenderson put it more than once, he was lazy as the devil. A mere figure of speech, of course, and not one that did justice to the enemy of mankind. When asked why he never did anything serious, Dick would good naturedly reply with a well modulated drawl that he didn't have to. His father was rich. There was but one other child, an unmarried daughter who, because of poor health, would probably never marry, and Dick was therefore heir presumptive to a larger estate. To a large estate. Wealth or social position he did not need to seek, for he was born to both. Charity Lomax had shamed him into studying law, but notwithstanding an hour or so a day spent at old Judge Fenderson's office, he did not make remarkable headway in his legal studies. What Dick needs, said the judge, who was fond of tropes, as as became a scholar, and of horses, as was befitting a Kentuckian, is the whip of necessity or the spur of ambition. So in some ways, Dick Dick Owens is passing as someone um, um, with purpose just because of his social position, his wealth or social position. But the perception of him is different. Is that he is lazy as the devil, and there should be some kind of whip of necessity or spur of ambition in him. But he passes like he is a person with purpose or ambition because of the wealth and social position attached to him. But even he says when asked why he never did anything serious, um, it's because he didn't have to. His father was rich. All right, so here's Charity's perception of Dick. So Could you love me, Charity, if I did something heroic? You never will, Dick. You're too lazy for any use. You'll never do anything harder than playing cards or fox hunting. Oh, come now, sweetheart. I've been courting you for a year, and it's the hardest work imaginable. Are you never going to love me? He pleaded. His hand sought hers, but she drew it back beyond his reach. I'll never love you, Dick Owens, until you have done something. When that time comes, I'll think about it. Wait, one must read 2 years to become a lawyer and work 5 more to make a reputation. We should both be gray by then. Oh, I don't know, she rejoined. It doesn't require a lifetime for a man to prove that he is a man. This one did something, or at least tried to. Well, I'm willing to attempt as much as any other man. What do you want me to do, sweetheart? Give me a test. Oh, dear me, said Charity. I don't care what you do, so you do something. Really, come to think of it, why should I care whether you do anything or not? I'm sure I don't know why you should, Charity, rejoined Dick humbly, for I am aware that I'm not worthy of it. Except that I do hate, she added, relenting slightly, to see a really clever man so utterly lazy and good for nothing. Thank you, my dear. A word of praise from you has sharpened my wits already. I have an idea. Will you love me if I run a Negro off to Canada? So he's looking to do something heroic. And this is sort of antithetical to the realistic literary tradition. This is when he's talking about something heroic, he's talking from the romantic standpoint. And this is likely Chesnutt's, the author's, criticism of Dick because he doesn't do anything beyond, he doesn't have any ambition, he doesn't have any purpose. And so he's looking for purpose, he's looking to do something heroic. He's looking to make a name for himself, essentially. In the same way that the white man who helped the other slave to get to Canada, who was eventually arrested and sent to prison, Dick doesn't necessarily want to go to prison, but he wants to do something heroic. And he thinks, well, if I run a Negro off to Canada, that will make me look heroic. And Charity is saying, unless you do something really important, right? It doesn't require a lifetime for a man to prove that he is a man. It shouldn't take you forever to prove to you that you're a man. And then he tells her, well, give me a test. Then why can't he come up with his own purpose? Well, he's trying to here, but it's more performative. And so it's going to be a heroic act that he's going after because he wants to, I don't think he necessarily wants to change the perception of him from, say, the judge or Charity. It's just that I think he wants to, for me, I think with Dick, I don't think he wants to actually run the plantation. I don't think he wants to responsibility. Running a Negro off to Canada is running product, is running an asset, is running the future earnings of something. But he doesn't want to take responsibility. So he'll pass like he is the son of a master of a plantation, and that he's an important businessman, but he doesn't really care to do it because why are you running a Negro off to Canada? So keep that in mind. All right, Dick's ruse. Father, he remarked casually to the colonel over the fried chicken, I'm feeling a trifle run down. I imagine my health would be improved somewhat by a little travel and change of scene. Why don't you take a trip to the north? Suggested his father. I think I'll adopt your suggestion, sir, replied the son, and run up to New York. And after I've been there a while, I may go on to Boston for a week or so. I've never been there, you know. There are some matters you can talk over with my factor in New York, rejoined the colonel. And while you are up there among the Yankees, I hope you'll keep your eyes and ears open to find out what the rascally abolitionists are saying and doing. They're becoming altogether too active for our comfort, and entirely too many ungrateful niggers are running away. I hope the conviction of that fellow yesterday may discourage the rest of the breed. I'll just like to catch anyone trying to run off one of my darkies. He'd get short shrift. I don't think any court would have a chance to try him. They are a pestiferous lot, assented Dick, and dangerous to our institutions. But say, Father, if I go north, I should want to take Tom with me. So he's interested in taking Tom, a slave, to try to run him off to Canada. But in his conversation, he's passing like he is in agreement with the current conditions of slavery, the economic conditions of slavery. He's saying that the abolitionists, essentially, and the ungrateful niggers are dangerous to our institutions. So he would like to see, because this word here, assented, means in agreement. So this is right here a ruse, because if his goal is to run off a Negro to Canada, why is he having a conversation with his father as if he's in agreement with his father? So, this right here is one of your first elements of passing for a son, Dick Owens, who is the son of a master who owns slaves in a plantation. So, we have him passing like he's in agreement with his father's view of abolitionists, ungrateful niggers, they who are both dangerous to our institution and the institution of slavery. All right, the colonel's alternative. So I don't think it's safe to take Tom up north, he declared with promptness and decision. He's a good enough boy, but too smart to trust among those low down abolitionists. I strongly suspect him of having learned to read, though I can't imagine how. I saw him with the newspaper the other day, and while he pretended to be looking at a woodcut, I'm almost sure he was reading the paper. I think it by no means safe to take him. What's the matter with Grandison? Suggested the colonel. He's handy enough, and I reckon we can trust him. He's too fond of good eating to risk losing his regular meals. Besides, he's sweet on your mother's maid, Betty, and I've promised to let him get married before long. I'll have Grandison up and we'll talk to him. So there's a difference between wanting to take Tom and he wants to take Tom because when you think about it, if Tom is the kind of person who actually knows how to read a newspaper, and he's been pretending to be looking at it, and he done learned how to read, then he's the actual one who's truly. It is evident that there's an implication that he's the one who's been passing. He's been passing like a person, like a slave who never learned how to read, but by Colonel's standards or perception of him, it looks like he actually knows how to read. So we don't want to send him, right? But Colonel believes that Grandison is the one who is so comfortable being a slave, good eating. He's not going to risk losing regular meals. He's sweet on a particular maid Betty, and he's already assented to the promise of being married. The colonel believes he's actually better for a person. He's not the type of person who's going to leave. Uh, he's not going to be that ungrateful uh, slave who will give up all of this good eating. He's handy enough as well. All of this good eating, these regular meals. He's not going to be the one who does that, but it's actually Grandison who's been passing the whole time, versus Tom, who's been pretending like he cannot read. He's also been passing. However, the colonel doesn't want him to go because he'll be the first one to give in to the low down abolitionists. All right, the colonel's appeal. So Grandison, said the colonel, when the Negro stood before him, hat in hand, yes, master. Haven't I always treated you right? Yes, master. Haven't you always got all you wanted to eat? Yes, master. And as much whiskey and tobacco as was good for you, Grandison? Yes, master. I should just like to know, Grandison, whether you don't think yourself a great deal better off than those poor freed Negroes down by the plank road, with no kind master to look after them, and no mistress to give them medicine when they're sick. And well, I should just reckon I will be better off than those low down free niggers, sir. And if anybody who they belong to has has their say nobody else lie about it, anybody um I belong to, I ain't got no cash, I ain't got no occasion to be ashamed um to tell them, no sir, indeed I ain't. So you get into some of the dialect of that time. The colonel was beaming. This was true gratitude, and his feudal heart thrilled at such appreciative homage. What cold blooded, heartless monsters they were who would break up this blissful relationship of kindly protection on the one hand, of wise subordination and loyal dependence on the other. The colonel always became indignant at the mere thought of such wickedness. So, slavery emancipation or freedom for slaves is wickedness to the colonel. There's also this dialogue here where the master likes this, yes, master. Every time he says something, yes, master, yes, master, yeah. So now the Negro slave is who is Grandison is conditioning his own master, because remember this is the passing of Grandison. So he's conditioning his own master. Every time he says something, it's yes, master, yes, master. And then also, I should just like to know, Grandison, whether you don't think yourself a great deal better. Don't you think you are better off than all those poor free Negroes? I mean, you get what you want here. I give you what you want. I have my mistress give you something like medicine. And he said, let me see if I can read this. Well, I should just reckon I is better off, sir, than them low down free niggers, sir. If anybody asks them who they belong to, they has to say nobody or else lie about it. Anybody asks me who I belongs to, I ain't got no occasion to be shamed to tell them, sir. No, no, D, I ain't. So if someone asks me who I belong to, I have no shame. This is all conditioning, because then the colonel beams. This was true gratitude for his feudal heart, appreciative of the idea of kindly protection. So the master slave relationship is one of a blissful one, with kindly protection on one hand and wise subordination and loyal dependence on the other. And so the colonel becomes indignant when there's talk of abolition or abolishing slavery. But do keep in mind that all of what you see, this yes master, yes master, yes master, is really Grandison conditioning the colonel to believe that he is a faithful slave and that he is grateful. All right, the colonel's decision. Grandison, the colonel continued, your young master Dick is going north for a few weeks, and I'm thinking of letting him take you along. Grandison grinned. Oh, yes, master, I'll take care of young master Dick. I want to warn you, though, Grandison, continued the colonel impressively, against these cussed Abolitionists who try to entice servants from their comfortable homes and their indulgent masters from the blue skies, the green fields, and the warm sunlight of their southern home and send them away off yonder to Canada, a dreary country where the woods are full of wild cats and wolves and bears, where the snow lies up to the eaves of the house for 6 months of the year, and the cold is so severe that it freezes your breath and curdles your blood, and where when runaway niggers get sick and can't work, they are turned out to starve and die, unloved and uncared for. I reckon, Grandison, that you have too much sense to permit yourself to be led astray by any such foolish and wicked people. Again, the abolitionists are considered foolish and wicked people. And one of the most important things I think you should take into consideration is um, that he doesn't want the abolitionists to try to entice them from the comfortable home of slavery, from an indulgent master. So I indulge you, I give you what you want, Grandison, right? And the irony of his statement is that he's calling his slavery or his economic condition as comfortable and indulgent, but he's painting a picture of freedom in a sense, right? When he discusses the blue skies, the green fields, the warm sunlight of the sun, I'm sorry, who try to entice servants from their comfortable homes and their indulgent masters from the blue skies, green fields, and the warm sunlight of their southern home and send them away. So here it is, you got all of this comfort. You got an indulgent master. You got blue skies, green fields, and warm sunlight in this southern home. Even though it's a plantation and you're a slave, you got your best here. So then, if you decide to leave and go yonder to Canada, you're going to run into wildcats and wolves and bears. You're going to run into snow, and that's going to be for 6 months to a year. You're going to be cold, severe, freezing your breath and curdles your blood. And when you get sick and can't work, um, Canada will turn you out to starve and die, meaning that you'll end up coming back to me anyway, because I am your indulgent master. So any cussed abolitionists who try to turn you away from all your comfort, they are considered wicked people. So Grandison is listening, of course, because the master is talking. But his grin is one of it reminds you of the picture of Mona Lisa smile. There's a lot of pain behind that grin, but you grin because you have no other choice but to grin. So this is kind of like a warning that the colonel is giving to Grandison, um, and he's taking it in as he takes it in. All right, Grandison's rules. This is the beginning, so this is a little bit longer, so we need to take a little bit more time. So, D, sir, I wouldn't low none of them cuss, low down abolitionists come nigh me. I would I would I be lowered allowed to hit him, sir. Certainly, Grandison replied the colonel, chuckling. Hit 'em as hard as you can. I reckon they'd rather like it. The God, I believe they would. It would serve 'em right to be hit by a nigger. Or else I didn't hit him, sir, continued Grandison reflectively. I'll tell Master Dick, and he fix 'em. He smashed their face off in 'em, sir. I just know he would. Oh, yes, Grandison, your young master will protect you. You need fear no harm while he is near. They won't try to steal me, sir, will they, master? Asked the Negro with sudden alarm. I don't know, Grandison, replied the colonel, lighting a fresh cigar. They're a desperate set of lunatics, and there's no telling what they may resort to. But if you stick close to your young master, and remember always that he is your best friend and understands your real needs and has your true interests at heart, and if you be careful to avoid strangers who try to talk to you, you'll stand a fair chance of getting back to your home and your friends. And if you please your master Dick, he'll buy you a present and a string of beads for Betty to wear when you and she get married in the fall. Thank you, master. Thank you, sir, replied Grandison, oozing gratitude at every pore. You is a good master to be sure, sir. Yes, indeed, you is. You can just bet me and Master Dick gonna get long just like I was I was on board um to Master Dick. In it, I won't be at fault if they don't want me for his boy all the time when we come back home again. All right, Grandison, you may go now. You needn't work anymore today. And here's a piece of tobacco for you off my own plug. Thank you, Master. Thank you, Master. You is the best master any nigger ever had in this world. And Grandison bowed and scraped and disappeared around the corner, his jaws closing round a large section of the Colonel's best tobacco. You may take Grandison, said the Colonel to his son. I allow he's abolitionist proof. So this encounter between the Colonel and Grandison is one of almost like role play for Grandison because we'll find out later that he plans to escape. So he knows the very institution of slavery and what the master wants to hear. So he says what the master wants to hear. And so they won't try to steal me, sir, master. They won't try to steal me. And if they try to do anything like that, I'm going to hit them. And then certainly, Grandison, replied the colonel, hit them as hard as you can. I reckon they rather like it to be hit by a nigger. And so to see two people from the same racial group fighting each other is something that's part of the institution of slavery as well. But one of the most important thing I want you to pay attention to is this training, this psychological training that the institution of slavery, as well as the masters of plantations, continue to put forth. They are a desperate set of lunatics. There's no telling what they may resort to. But if you stick close to your young master, remember always that he is your best friend and understands your real needs and has your true interests at heart. If you will be careful to avoid strangers who try to talk to you, you'll stand a fair chance of getting back home to your friends. So no matter what, your goal is to get back home. You're going with my son to go handle some business and serve him, but your home is back here. So make sure to ignore all those abolitionists. Don't worry about them. You have my son with you, and he's going to be there for you. And you stick close to him, you won't have any problems. So this whole thing works like a role play for Grandison because he's been living in this plantation system so long to understand how the master thinks. The master likes to be thanked, essentially. The master he likes the gratitude at every pour. He wants to be the type of person. All of the plantation masters had this kind of ideal in mind to be thanked. You should be thankful that I'm here to protect you and provide all your needs and have your true interests at heart, and that I protect you from strangers, and you should be gracious. So that if you're all these things, you would be abolitionist proof. There's no way that a um, abolitionist is going to try to distract you and get you to leave. The irony of this, though, is it's the son Dick who is trying to get Grandison off to Canada. So he's abolitionist proof, but he's not son proof. He's not the son of the master proof that the son actually has plans of getting him off to Canada, off to freedom. So now that we have some sort of ideal of what's going on with the narrative, now let's look at strategies and then how Grandison performs. So Dick's strategy number one: surround Grandison with freemen. Because if your plan is to get him off to Canada and have him to become a free Negro, you have to surround him around free men. So, but there were Negro waiters in the dining room and mulatto bellboys, and Dick had no doubt that Grandison, with the negative gregariousness and garrulousness of his race would foregather and palaver with them sooner or later, and Dick hoped that they would speedily inoculate him with the virus of freedom. For it was not Dick's intention to say anything to his servant about his plan to free him, for obvious reasons. To mention one of them, if Grandison should go away and by legal process be recaptured, his young master's part in the matter would doubtless become known, which would be embarrassing to Dick, to say the least. If, on the other hand, he should merely give Grandison sufficient latitude, he had no doubt he would eventually lose him. Grandison should have a fair chance to become free by his own initiative. So this is Dick working against the institution of slavery and against his own father. And so he wants to give him a fair chance to be free. He hopes that exposure to these free men would inoculate him with the virus of freedom. So transition from the virus of slavery to the virus of freedom. But he doesn't, the irony is, the interesting thing is he wants to be considered a hero, but he doesn't want it to be known because then he would get into trouble. He would get into trouble, right? Remember from the very beginning, the white man who tried to help the Negro ended up getting exposed, and then he was sent to prison. So this idea of him becoming sort of like a hero would only work with Charity because she would only be the one who would know. All right, Dick's strategy number 2, encourage independence and freedom-like behavior. So meanwhile, he kept Grandison supplied with pocket money and left him mainly to his own devices. Every night when Dick came in, he hoped he might have to wait upon himself, and every morning he looked forward with pleasure to the prospect of making his toilet unaided. His hopes, however, were doomed to disappointment, for every night when he came in, Grandison was on hand with the boot jack and a nightcap mixed for his young master as the colonel had taught him to mix it. And every morning Grandison appeared with his master's boots blacked and his clothes brushed and laid his linen out for the day. Grandison, said Dick one morning after finishing his toilet, this is the chance of your life to go around among your own people and see how they live. Have you met any of them? Yes, sir, I've seen some of them, but I don't know, I don't care nothing for them, sir. They're different from the niggers down out way. They they loathe that they're free, but they ain't got sense enough there to know they ain't half as well off as they would be down south where they be appreciated. Okay, so we have when you are encouraging independence and freedom, it's going to come with pocket money. And the hope for Grandison, I mean, the hope for Dick Owens is that Grandison would not fulfill his role as a servant to him, but but Grandison has to pass like he is a person who is still a slave, a person who he can't let on to uh, Dick Owens that he plans to escape. So he has to pretend and pass like he is still servant to a master. And then in the language of the colonel, uh, they's lows free, but they ain't got sense enough to know they ain't half as well off as they would be down south where they be appreciated. So um, that's colonel talk. That's the colonel in him talking, but that's the language that he understands from the colonel that you should be grace, you should have gratitude, you should be as an indulgent master. Don't I give you what you want? So he's just repeating the very language that he's been taught as a slave under a plantation system with the master. All right, Dick strategy number 3, encourage collaboration. So when 2 weeks had passed without any apparent effect of evil example upon Grandison, Dick resolved to go on to Boston, where he thought the atmosphere might prove more favorable to his ends. After he had been at the Revere House for a day or two without losing Grandison, he decided upon slightly different tactics. So, having ascertained from a city directory the addresses of several well known abolitionists, He wrote them each a letter, something like this: Dear friend and brother, a wicked slaveholder from Kentucky, stopping at the Revere House, has dared to insult the liberty loving people of Boston by bringing his slave into their midst. Shall this be tolerated, or shall steps be taken in the name of liberty to rescue a fellow man from bondage? For obvious reasons, I can only sign myself a friend of humanity. So again, Dick Dick is working truly against his own the system in which he's been reared, the system in which his father has laid out expectations. He's messing with his father's money when he does this, but his goal is to try to do something, to be heroic for charity. So the very people that the father colonel doesn't want Grandison to know and be aware of and spend time with, his son is pushing Grandison in that direction. And so he's encouraging collaboration in a sense that, okay, we are of the same humanity and we need to work to get this fellow man from bondage so he can be free and liberty loving as all of the people of Boston. Now that we understand Dick's strategies, let's look at Grandison's performance. Performance number one: perform the duties. So, but Grandison was on hand again when his master came back to the hotel at night and was in attendance again in the morning with hot water to assist at his master's toilet. Dick sent him on further errands from day to day, and upon one occasion came squarely up to him inadvertently, of course, while Grandison was engaged in conversation with a young white man in clerical garb. When Grandison saw Dick approaching, he edged away from the preacher and hastened toward his master with a very evident expression of relief upon his countenance. Master Dick, he said, these here abolitionists pestering the life out of me, trying to get me to run away. I don't pay no attention, but they rouse me so sometimes that I'm feared I'll hit some of them some of these days. That might get me into trouble. I ain't said nothing uh, there about it, Master Dick, for I did I didn't want to disturb you, but I don't like it, sir. No, sir. I done. It's gonna I's going back home. Let me see. I's going back home for long, Master Dick. We'll be back. We'll be going back soon enough," replied Dick somewhat shortly, while he inwardly cursed the stupidity of a slave who could be free and would not, and registered a secret vow that if he were unable to get rid of Grandison without assassinating him, and were therefore compelled to take him back to Kentucky, he would see that Grandison got a taste of an article of slavery that would make him regret his wasted opportunities. Meanwhile, he determined to tempt his servant yet more strongly. So Dick is calling this push for Grandison to pursue freedom by engaging the abolitionist movement as opportunity. That's in contrast to his father belief about slaves and how masters are good to them, and that's their opportunity to receive kindness from a master. This is a ruse here. He's performing the very duty of, see, all these abolitioners, they keep pestering me, but I'm to try to get me to run away, but I don't pay no attention to them. And I wanted to kind of tell you, but I didn't want to disturb you. And so this is him acting out a slave, acting out how the slave is supposed to act within the system. It doesn't matter whether he's in Kentucky or in Boston or in New York. It doesn't matter. He's going to act out. He's going to pass like he's a slave. So he still performs the duties. That's his performance. And with Dick, he's saying that he's missing out on his opportunities, and that when they get back, he's going to really show them how uh, the consequences of a slave, the consequences of missing out on these wasted opportunities will affect him as a servant. Grandison's performance number 2, perform the gratitude. Grandison, he said next morning, I'm going away for a day or two, but I shall leave you here. I shall lock up $100 in this drawer and give you the key. If you need any of it, use it and enjoy yourself. Spend it all if you like, for this is probably the last chance you'll have for some time to be in a free state. And you better enjoy your liberty while you may. When he came back a couple of days later and found the faithful Grandison at his post and the $100 intact, Dick felt seriously annoyed. His vexation was increased by the fact that he could not express his feelings adequately. He did not even scold Grandison. How could he, indeed, find fault with one who so sensibly recognized his true place in the economy of civilization and kept it with such touching fidelity? I can't say a thing to him, groaned Dick. He deserves a leather medal made out of his own hide, tanned. I reckon I'll write to father and let him know what a model servant he has given me. He wrote his father a letter which made the colonel swell with pride and pleasure. I really think the colonel observed to one of his friends that Dick ought to have the nigger interviewed by the Boston papers so that they may see how contented and happy our darkies really are. So here it is. Um, Dick moves from this idea of Grandison becoming a free man, a free Negro, to now, I guess, with all the opportunities, I've tried to get him to enjoy his liberty, and I've given him money and everything. I gave him $100. He still won't do it. So I guess I just have to recognize his true place in the economy of civilization. And so, and then also he's a model servant. He's a model servant, and of course the colonel has pride and pleasure in it, and that he's a contented and happy darky. And so this is basically what Grandison is performing. He's performing the perception of the colonel and Dick, that he has recognized his true place in the economy of civilization, that he don't need liberty, he don't need money. All he needs to do is be a model servant, and so that he can make his colonel or his plantation master feel pride and pleasure, and to also show them that he's contented and happy. All of this is performing. This is performing the gratitude, and the reason why we know this is because he escapes. Grandison's performance number 3, performed the escape. Dick retraced his footsteps towards the inn. The young woman chanced to look out of the window and saw the handsome young gentleman she had waited on a few minutes before, standing in the road a short distance away, apparently engaged in earnest conversation with a colored man employed as hostler for the inn. She thought she saw something pass from the white man to the other, but at that moment her duties called her away from the window. And when she looked out again, the young gentleman had disappeared, and the hostler, with two other young men of the neighborhood, one white and one colored, were walking rapidly towards the falls. Dick made the journey homeward alone, and as rapidly as the conveyances of the day would permit, Dick got off easier than he had expected. He told a straight story and a truthful one so far as it went. The colonel raged at first, but rage soon subsided into anger, and anger moderated into annoyance, and annoyance into a sort of garrulous sense of injury. The colonel thought he had been hardly used. He had trusted this Negro, and he had broken faith. Yet, after all, he did not blame Grandison so much as he did the abolitionists, who were undoubtedly at the bottom of it. So he believes, the colonel believes that it was the abolitionists who convinced Grandison. And Grandison, what happened is, where is it? She thought she had saw something pass from the white man to the other, but at that moment her duties had called her away from. And when she looked out again, the young gentleman had disappeared, and the hostler with two other young men of the neighborhood, one white and one colored, were walking rapidly towards the falls. So it looks like in this case that the abolitionists had convinced um, Grandison, I guess, to commit to commit suicide instead of being a slave. And the father is not going to blame his own son, even though his son is the one who's at fault. So this is his way of performing the escape, but it doesn't look like it. When we read this, it doesn't look like he actually escaped. It looks like, or it reads like, that um, if you're walking towards the falls, that means you are walking towards death. It doesn't necessarily say that he jumped into the falls, but if you're walking towards it, there's the implication that it means death. So this is performing the escape. Grandison's performance number 4, performed the capture. So a week after the wedding, they were seated one afternoon on the piazza of the colonel's house, where Dick had taken his bride, when a negro from the yard ran down the lane and threw open the big gate for the colonel's buggy to enter. The colonel was not alone. Beside him, ragged and travel stained, bowed with weariness, and upon his face a haggard look that told of hardship and privation, sat the lost Grandison. Before these lines here, Dick wants to marry Charity, and he tells her what he actually did so that he can look like a hero. The colonel alighted at the steps. "Take the lines, Tom," he said to the man who had opened the gate, "and drive round to the barn. Help Grandison down. Poor devil, he's so stiff he can hardly move. And get a tub of water and wash him and rub him down and feed him and give him a big drink of whiskey, and then let him come round and see his young master and his new mistress." The colonel's face wore an expression compounded of joy and indignation: joy at the restoration of a valuable piece of property, indignation for reasons he proceeded to state. "It's astounding the depths of depravity the human heart is capable of. I was coming along the road 3 miles away when I heard some one call me from the roadside. I pulled up the mare, and who should come out of the woods but Grandison. The poor nigger could hardly crawl along with the help of a broken limb. I was never more astonished in my life. You could have knocked me down with a feather. He seemed pretty far gone. He could hardly talk above a whisper, and I had to give him a mouthful of whiskey to brace him up so he could tell his story. It's just as I thought from the beginning, Dick. Grandison had no notion of running away. He knew when he was well off and where his friends were. All the persuasions of abolition liars and runaway niggers did not move him. The colonel killed the fatted calf for Grandison, and for 2 or 3 weeks the returned wanderer's life was a slave's dream of pleasure. His fame spread throughout the county, and the colonel gave him a permanent place among the house servants, where he could always have him conveniently at hand to relate his adventures to admiring visitors. So the Grandison basically comes back, and it sort of works like a capture. He comes back and tells him that he really didn't try to run off. They tried to steal him away, in a sense, right? That it was those abolitionists who really were. It's astounding the depths of depravity the human heart is capable of. I was coming along the 3 miles, and when I heard someone call me, put up the mare, who should be. And with the help of, so I was never more. You could have knocked me off. He seemed pretty far gone. Grandison had no notion of running away. He knew when he was well off where his friends were, and all the persuasions of abolition liars did not move him. So somewhere, um, Grandison is relaying this narrative as if they had taken him without using that wording. Because if he's returning with the idea that, see, he knew he was well off. He knew he had it good here. That's why those abolitionists, they were just liars, and he perceived them as liars. So then this idea of the colonel killed the fatted calf works kind of like a biblical thing. And then for 2 or 3 weeks, the returned wanderer's life was a slave's dream of pleasure. And so then he became actually famous. And this is ironic because remember, it is Dick who wants to try to make something of himself, become heroic. And here it is, Grandison is the one whose fame is spreading throughout the county. Now, Dick has a problem with this story that Grandison told, and he tells his father. That's why you see the ellipses here. So you'd have to read that more on your own. But is who is it that has become heroic? The slave. The slave has become heroic in this situation versus Dick, who actually wanted to become heroic. All right, so Grandison's performance number 5, perform the escape. About 30 weeks after Grandison's return, the colonel's faith in sable humanity was rudely shaken, and its foundations almost broken up. He came near losing his belief in the fidelity of the Negro to his master, the servile virtue most highly prized and most sedulously cultivated by the colonel and his kind. One Monday morning, Grandison was missing. And not only Grandison, but his wife, Betty, the maid, his mother, Aunt Eunice, his father, Uncle Ike, his brothers, Tom and John, and his little sister, Elsie, were likewise absent from the plantation. And a hurried search and inquiry into the neighborhood resulted in no information as to their whereabouts. Once, twice, the colonel thought he had them, but they slipped through his fingers. So this is when he started his search. One last glimpse he caught of his vanishing property as he stood, accompanied by a United States Marshal, on a wharf at a port on the south shore of Lake Erie, on the stern of a small steamboat, which was receding rapidly from the wharf with her nose pointing toward Canada. There stood a group of familiar dark faces, and the look they cast backward was not one of longing for the flesh pots of Egypt. The colonel saw Grandison point him out to one of the crew of the vessel, who waved his hand derisively toward the colonel. So when he woke up, Grandison was missing. So who knows, Grandison would have had the idea to plan an escape um, from the very first time when the colonel tells his son Dick to take Grandison instead of Tom. And here it is, Tom and his brother. So it's interesting here that the colonel didn't want Dick to take Tom, right? Because he knew he would run away, but he didn't think that Grandison would run away because he's abolitionist proof. Then we also have this idea of some divine implications about Egypt as well. And then there's the goal to get to Canada. But Grandison pointed out to his crew, who waved his hand to right. So they were basically saying goodbye to their slave life, meaning that they were never truly gracious and thankful that Grandison was passing the whole time. He was passing like a slave, a grateful slave, or someone who understands a master is only trying to be kind to him. So he performs the escape. All right, so this is the end of the presentation. These are the works consulted, so you can find the author's work, um, that link. Also, passing in literature and literary theory information. You also have Fugitive Slave Acts information, then the abolitionist movement links. The previous lectures, don't forget about realism and naturalism, Spanish American War, glossary of literary terms, writing for English courses, and then the point of view from Merriam-Webster's dictionary. That applies to Henry James's Daisy Miller, a case study. All right, so for Charles Waddell Chesnutt resources, there is a Britannica entry for him, which is he's an American writer, and then of course there is a Chesnutt archive of all his different works. So this is the end of the presentation. Thank you very much for listening.